India continues to scale new heights in its space exploration, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ambitious goal for ISRO to set up a space station by 2035 and send a manned moon mission by 2040 is an example of just that. From a time when the Western powers kept India out of the space race through their comprehensive nuclear test ban treaties, and India is now being seen as a global space power, we have, in fact, come a long way. Space exploration has always been an extension of the larger geopolitics at play in the global arena. The space wars began between Soviet Union and United States of America, the two major superpowers that emerged after World War I. From launching artificial satellites, space programs to the moon, Venus, Mars, there was human space flights to the moon, and finally setting up of the space stations in outer space. Today, the global space race has become wider, with China, Japan, and lately India eager to show off their technological and superior spacecraft capabilities, thereby jostling for the position of the global superpowers of the world. All right, I will quickly give you a synopsis of what has gone on in the space arena of the world from the time of the end of the World War, and in the 1960s is when the execution of these ideation that took place in America, first in Soviet Union, erstwhile Soviet Union, and then in America, and of course it went about being spread in European nations, then Japan and China, and finally in India. Let's start off with this timeline that we witness with regards to the ISRO budget that has been provided by successive governments in our country year by year. If we take a look at the time of 1972 and 73, there was the budget of about 15,000 crore, a little more than 15,000 crores that was allocated for ISRO, for the space exploration and space flight capabilities to be harnessed. This was also the time when the first artificial satellite of India was launched into outer space from the Russian Cosmos Space Mission, Space Agency. Then we take a look at 1992 to 1993, and that's where an increase of 0.06%. We take a look at 2002 and 2003, there has in fact been a reduction from the space budget that was provided in the previous decade. We take a look at the 2012 and 2013, there is again an increase from the last decade by a 0.05%. We take a look finally at, okay, this is 2018 and 2019, again an increase. We further see in 2019 and 2020 there is another rise, and then there is a blip in 2021. In 2021, 2022 we again see a slight rise of 0.05%, and 2022, 2023 there is a blip of 0.05%. But let's quickly also take a look at, while these developments were taking place in India in terms of giving the budget to ISRO to allow for space programs and missions to then take flight, there was also development taking place simultaneously and at a more rapid stage, at a more rapid speed when it came to the space stations that were being set up on the outer space by the global powers. The first space station called by the name of Salute, which was launched in 1971 and lasted up until 1986, so about a decade and a half. It cost $40 billion to the Soviet Union. Salute 1 was the first space station that was launched by humankind. Then came the turn of United States of America. Let's quickly, all right. In fact, okay, let's take a look at more of these highlights of why Salute was so important and ingenious a space station. Salute 1 was visited by crews of Soyuz 10 and Soyuz 11. Can we have a look at the next slide, please? All right, and the crews of Soyuz 11 spent 23 days in the space station that was set up by Soviet Union. In fact, there have been a number of countries, including United States of America, who sent off their manned missions with the help of Salute. This was after the peace treaty that had been forged between both the countries in 1993. So there was, instead of a space race, there was an era of space cooperation. In fact, all right, and then you take a look at United States of America. It was from 1973 to 1979. It's a 6-year mission of the Skylab that was set up in outer space, the space station that was set up in outer space. If we can put out the estimated cost of the station, it stayed in orbit for 2,249 days, which is about 6.6 years. If you could take it also, it was visited by 3 crews of 3 astronauts. Okay. All right. So also information about payloads like an orbital workshop and a solar observatory that were launched off to the space station. Finally, after 6.6 years, Skylab's orbit decayed and it disintegrated on 11th of July in 1979. Finally, the turn came for Mir, 1986 and 2001. This was a collab. This was in fact the Soviet Union and then Russia that came to form Mir. Mir was actually launched as part of a cooperation between Soviet Union and then Russia and the United States of America, and it cost $4.2 billion US. Mir was the first modular space station and it was assembled in space itself. Valery Polyakov holds the record for the longest continuous space flight, spending 14 months aboard Mir on a single trip. Mir was occupied for a total of 12.5 years out of its 15-year lifespan. And in fact, the crews conducted experiments in biology, human biology, physics, astronomy, meteorology and spacecraft systems. There were a number of countries, including US, like I said, would send their cosmonauts and their missiles and their other space exploration programs via Mir. In fact, finally, with the end of the space war, there was an international space station that was set up from 1998. It continues to be in action up until now. It cost $150 billion. The countries that are part of the International Space Station include US, Russia, France and other nations. It is divided into 2 segments, Russia Orbital Segment, ROS, and United States of Orbital Segment. All right, can we move on to the next slide? The assembly of the space station is an evolving process, with the last module Nauka sent up in 2021. Okay, let's take a look at China, because the Tiangong space station came up much later in 2021. It continues to work up until now, cost at $8 billion US. Tiangong, which means Sky Palace, is China's first long-term space station. If you take a look at the difference in the economies and their prowess, has also then led to the formation of these space stations. It comprises of 4 modules and was assembled in space over 2022. Tiangong has a capability of 3 crew members at a single time. All right, if we can also put out information about which are the other crewed missions that have taken flight to the Tiangong space station. All right, now finally we take a look at the man on the moon. The first successful mission was carried out in 1969, which was the Apollo 11 moon mission, where Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin participated. That was the crew. In fact, there was Michael Collins, and the most popular, most famous being Neil Armstrong, the first man to put foot on moon. It cost $355 million, the first mission that landed humans on the moon and brought them back. In fact, prior to this moon mission, there was the first space mission, first space manned mission by Russia, that then pushed United States of America and their then President John F. Kennedy to push for this moon mission in the space race. There was Apollo 12, there were after Apollo 11, there were 5 crewed missions of United States, one after the other. This was in 1969 again. There was Charles Conrad, Alan Bean and Richard Gordon that were aboard this mission. It cost $375 million to the government of America. Then it was the turn of Apollo 14 in 1971. In just a span of 2 years, there was Alan Shepard, there was Stuart Roosa and Edgar Mitchell, and the mission cost America $400 million. 1971 again, this was in August 7, July 26 to August 7, Apollo 15. It cost $445 million. The crew was again David Scott, James Irwin and Hadley Reel. Apollo 16, 1972, cost the United States of America an additional $445 million. The crew included John Young, Charles Duke and Ken Mattingly. Apollo 17, this was in 1972. Again, there was Gene Cernan, Harrison Smith and Ronald Evans. The cost of this mission was an additional $450 million. This was also the last time that there was a manned lunar mission by any country. All right, so we've taken a look at how the space race started off from 1950s up until 1970s. There was a trough wherein we also saw that America and United States of America and Russia then decided to cooperate. And finally, we see also the advent of more countries, including China, which very recently set up its space station and has carried on crewed missions to the space station for further exploration for long durations, while Japan and a few other countries at this point in time rely on the International Space Station that was built in collaboration and cooperation of all these global powers in Europe, in Europe and America. Meanwhile, there is also at this point of time the ambition of India and ISRO that is showcased in the statement that has been made by the Prime Minister about setting up a space station by 2035, a manned moon mission by 2040. Now, while I open up this discussion and speak about the larger implication of these fresh space wars or space race that is now being witnessed, we are in 2023, perhaps must have started off back in 2021, 2020 as well, and there are new players that are joining in, particularly China and India in the South Asia region. All right, I have with me Suresh Naik. He is a space scientist from ISRO, and Mr. Naik, interesting set of developments. The fact that we take a look at the trajectory of the space budget that the government successively have allocated to ISRO gives us an indication of how there has been an increased importance that has been given by the governments from time to time, from decade after decade, when it comes to space exploration, when it comes to putting out our space flight capabilities to the world, and thereby also strengthening our position in the geopolitical arena. Yes,
it is very much so. I think if you see the evolution of ISRO's program, initially, till let us say in the beginning of 2000 era, ISRO was concentrating on using the space technology for beneficial applications for entire Indians. Okay, so initially it was actually a phase of experimental satellite, which required relatively less amount. Then when we went into the operational satellite phase, where the services cannot be stopped, so you had to be very sort of careful that the services are available day after day without any interruption, like in SAT and IRS, then you had to spend more money to have that kind of reliability and redundancy. In this space, we need to have a network. So naturally, that requires more budget. And then after doing that completely, we wanted heavier launch vehicles. Again, that requires higher budget. And finally, in let's say with Chandrayaan 1, when 2004 or something, this was announced, the budget required for lunar and interplanetary missions is order of magnitude higher. So that is how the budgets for ISRO requirements went on increasing, and government also was really encouraging them and providing the budgets. And when it comes to human space flight, definitely a lot more money is required because additional technologies, reliability, safety, security systems are required, and human rating is required, and that again costs more money. So that is how the budget allocations for ISRO has been increasing. But even then, I would say that ISRO's program is the lowest cost program in the world. That is because we do not have the technologies like, going straight to the moon in 5 days. Instead of that, we first go into the Earth orbit, keep the satellite there for about 20 days, increasing the orbit altitude. Then we finally go into the trans-lunar orbit, or even trans-Mars orbit, or even for going to Sun.
Okay.
These help reducing the cost.
Okay. I have with me CM Nautiyal also. He's a senior scientist. He joins me on the telecast. Mr. Nautiyal, now, when the Prime Minister makes an ambitious goal for ISRO, says that by 2035 we should have a space station of our own. By 2040 we must have a manned mission to the moon. This also reflects on an increasing development that is taking place in the space arena. There was a lull when we saw back in the 1990s, after the space race that was witnessed primarily between Soviet Union and America, and now again a jostling for the space for who's going to be the superpower in the arena, and then in the larger context in the global arena as well.
I don't think that India is kind of getting into a race or something. India has had its own more or less independent space program, and it has been very successful, and as Naik pointed out, a very cost-effective one. We are the most cost-effective in the world. Now, something which started around 1962 seriously within Coast Path and later in 1969 as a space department, I think we have come a long way. And the beauty is that at present, we are not dependent by and large on any foreign technology or anything. We are going on our own. But in case we want to have a faster delivery to moon or Mars, we have to have a much more powerful rockets like Soyuz or Saturn V. At present, we have to make do with GSLV M3, which are not very powerful, and therefore it takes almost 4 months or more for us to reach moon. So a lot of money has to be pumped in. And we should also remember that now space is not only a kind of a, they had a competition, Soviet Union and American, almost a nationality competition, who reaches there first. But for us, it's not that. It's also an economic or commercial venture for us. In the sense that when we increase our launching capabilities, we are also making our satellite launching programs much more effective. So the capabilities which we develop in case of one program, they can also be useful for the other. So I think bringing in more money is really important.
Okay.
And I think it should be feasible to be on moon by 2035.
Okay. So, Suresh Naikji, then the question arises, why has it taken India so long to first have a manned mission, to even think about making such a landmark movement in our country's space history, setting up a space station, because the first one was set up back in the 1970s?
Yeah, actually, you see, if you see the historically, we started in 1960s, that too with a modest program of launching very small rockets, and that too those were imported ones. And that was somewhere in 1969, we launched our first homemade rocket, that too a small rocket with 5 kg payload and only up to altitude of about 40 to 60 kilometers. Whereas, what happened in case of USA and Russia, that during, I mean, after the World War II ended, these allies had a victory over Germany. And Germany had already developed the technology for rocket, and they had already used the V2 rockets in the World War very
Right.
successfully. And that particular advantage was taken by America and Russia, and they took with them some of the German space scientists, rocket scientists. That's how von Braun went to America. And whatever rocket he has designed is still being used. And same with Russia. And they got a very sort of a big advantage in starting their space program in 1940s, so almost 20 years before India. Secondly, if you look at the present budget of ISRO, it is hardly 10% that of NASA, because after all we have to be very careful about spending money on space technology development, because there will be requirement for other needs, and we are very still a developing country. Our financial ability doesn't allow us to increase that budget, which all other space agencies have, including China. So that is the very important thing to remember. But at the same time, we have achieved some of the feats which even America, Russia, and developed countries have not achieved, like finding water on the moon for the first time, then getting into the Mars orbit without a failure for the first attempt. No other country has done this.
Right.
So,
But then why do you think there are benchmarks that are created and followed when it comes to the things, the explorations, the capabilities that are shown by America and erstwhile Soviet Union? Why is it that a manned moon mission and a manned space mission is looked as the epitome of being capable when it comes to spacecraft explorations? Why is it that the criteria that has been set by the West is then followed by other countries?
Yeah, actually, because that is a logical step in the exploration of space. If you want to go to moon or Mars or any other planet, that actually is done normally in 3 steps. First thing is you send a spacecraft which flies by the object in space. Okay, so that is least expensive. The second thing is you send an orbiter. So that gives you more time to study that particular planet. Third thing is send a robotic mission. And then definitely that gives you in situ measurement chances, and you get more data. And finally, you send a human being on moon. And that, of course, is the ultimate step. And you see, these are glamorous and fascinating missions, because India gave importance to this, using the space technology for human benefits, right? And that was our primary aim, and we have achieved it phenomenally well. Actually, there are so many applications.
Mr. Nautiyal, then the very basic question, why do countries and humans find the need to explore outer space?
Somebody asked a person, why do you climb up the Himalayas? He says, because it's there. That is one answer. But I think of late, with the enhancement in our communication capabilities, with our increased capacity to monitor what's happening on Earth and watching it from the space and making predictions for the future. For example, in case of natural calamities, in case of cloud formation, in case of climate changes or weather changes. So all these things have added to our capability, and this all has been possible with our satellite technology, and which has given us almost another hand to handle the situation on Earth. This is one thing.
Okay.
In answer to the question, why do space science? Then we know about communication. We know that Space Application Center, when Professor Rajpal was there, in the beginning, there was a site experiment. And that was basically aimed at taking education to the doorstep of the people. People who could not go to school, they had means to learn. So in education, in weather monitoring, in understanding the natural calamities, in keeping a watch over the whole country. And now, once we are close to the moon, or if we can have an orbiter near moon, for example, even this time there is an experiment with the orbiter, with the module, which would be watching Earth as a habitable planet. We are learning about Earth from space. We are learning about the science of life on Earth, which we would like to see on some other planets or around some other stars.
Yeah.
So all this is intellectual as well as...
Yeah, absolutely. That, that reminds me of that one picture that I think every Indian worth his salt knows about, that there was this payloads that were being carried on a bicycle
Yes.
back in the day. And that's the extremely contrasting picture of India when it comes to its technological and space prowess versus on the ground, the humble beginnings for the country when India was still at this point of time evolving into a country of greater magnitude and capacities.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.